here with the famous or infamous Edward Roske.
Wait, to clarify, infamous means more than famous, right? Sorry, it's a line from the Three Amigos movie. Go ahead with your introduction. I will stop interrupting you, Rebecca.
I don't believe you. So we here at ArganoInterRel love making the world a smarter place. And we decided that in addition to that, we really wanted to connect some of our experts with you on a more personal level. So we're doing this series where you get to see an interview and we're asking some fun questions and then digging into a little bit about what makes our experts passionate about their field in EPM. So we're starting with our grand leader, Edward Roske, and he is presenting at Kscope on revolutionizing budgeting and planning and the state of finance solutions transformations, which we're very excited about. But we're going to start with some more casual questions. Edward, what is your...
I'll stop sharing. That way they can see our heads nice and big. And if anybody has any additional questions, Q&A those things. And we'll treat this like a Ask Edward Anything until we give a teaser of the presentations from the conference. So yeah, Rebecca, ask me whatever.
What's your favorite way to spend a day off?
Oh, I actually had a day off. I think it was in 2013. I was sick that day. So I'll tell you how I spend my evenings and weekends. I know what you're thinking. Edward probably does really cool things, generally involving sports balls. The opposite is really true. My idea of a fun day off is either reading or playing Dungeons and Dragons. Shocking absolutely no one, I'm always the dungeon master. I never actually play because they only get to play one character. I get to play the rest of them in the entire universe, and that's great fun. And by the time it gets to evening time, I never miss a chance to dance, karaoke, cosplay, or do an escape room. So I think with that, I've established my geek cred like really, really high. Apropos of nothing, 11 people dropped when I told them that.
Weird. So, they were like Dungeons and Dragons. Bye.
Yeah, it's like, what is this? Don't worry, we will actually be talking content. This is the get to know the presenter portion of the masterclass. So.
Yes, because otherwise, how would you know that Edward was a huge nerd?
Yeah, I like how you just said that with a completely straight face. Well done, Rebecca.
What's the best vacation you ever took and why?
Oh, that's fun. I'll tell you, so I've done a lot of the Oracle speaking tours kind of around the world. And that's as close as I come to like a dedicated vacation. And I did one where I circumvented the globe and went like Dallas to Atlanta to South Africa. And got to go on a safari down there, and then went from there to Thailand, to Cambodia, to Angkor Wat, back to Thailand. I think I stopped in Dubai and Saudi. Then I ended up over in Japan. But the final stop on the whole thing is actually I've spent 2 days in New Zealand, and it exceeded my expectations better than I will cover Glenn Swartzberg's comment in a second. Better than any. I thought it was basically just a big national park and had nothing to offer. It was just kind of a tiny version of Australia. But I spent an entire day going to these caves. I think they're called the Waiimu Caves. I'm totally mispronouncing that. I probably just offended an entire nation. But you start by rappelling down through a hole into a deep cave. Once you get into the cave, you click onto a zip line and you zip line in complete darkness. And then you scream really loudly because it's terrifying. And the screaming wakes up the glowworms. And then the entire tube that you are ziplining through gets lit by glowworms. When you get to the other side, you unclip, get down, and you get into a raft and you go black water rafting, which is whitewater rafting in darkness except for a headlamp. And then when you get all the way down at the end of the whole thing, the only way out is to free climb about a 15-20 foot waterfall. And it's exhausting, but absolutely the best experience that my wife and I have ever had, with the only possible exception being our wedding and honeymoon, because Glenn Schwartzberg told me to mention that or she might kill me.
wonder how many people get stuck like at the waterfall.
There was at least one person who was getting a lift up. Like it was she was not so much climbing as she was being pushed by people from kind of underneath. But I did make it, so it's a humble brag.
Okay, one more traveling question. What's the next place on your travel bucket list and why?
Oh, I've been to 6 continents. I've been to 61 countries, and I'm finishing off my continent list in December. I'm finally going to Antarctica, and I am going to do a webcast from Antarctica. I don't care if I'm delivering this thing to penguins. I'm going to stream it so that I can say I presented on all 7 continents. But yes, I'm doing a 21-day cruise from Argentina to Antarctica and back on the wonderful Seabourn, part of Holland America Group, part of Carnival. I wholly recommend you use them. Amazing, amazing cruise line. Oh, coincidentally, also a customer. But yeah, Antarctica.
Sounds nice. There are not bears there.
Yeah.
For those of you who didn't get that, the caps are named the Arctic, Antarctica and the Arctic because it's bears and not bears, which is helpful. The not bears have penguins.
Yes. Somebody did just ask the follow-up question, is Glenn providing you all of the technical answers? Yes, I can only do, like, where am I going? Glenn's like, well, here's the correct answer to say, here's what technically you should be responding. So thank you, Glenn Schwartzberg, for not actually being on audio, but still helping me with all the tricky stuff.
Well, he can't be on audio because then we'd hear the keyboard so quickly. What was the last TV show you binge watched, Edward?
If it's seasons count, Bridgerton season 2. If it's an entire TV show, I fell in love with something on. It's actually a network sitcom called Ghosts, 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 and it stars Rose McIver from iZombie. Oh, just to clarify for everybody, I have the TV watching habits of a 14-year-old girl. So pretty much anything on the CW. And so Rose McIver was iZombie, and this show is called Ghosts, where basically anyone who's ever died in a certain region kind of comes back, and the previews don't do it justice, and I recommend you watch it. Somebody asked a question online, top 5 movies. I'll tell you my number 1 recommendation at the moment, and this deserves to win Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Actress, you name it. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. It is directed by the Russo brothers, who did Avengers: Infinity War and Avengers: Endgame, and thought, let's do a small art house film about the multiverse. And it's amazing. You will laugh so hard, you will cry, and you will cry so hard, you'll start laughing at yourself. It's absolutely wonderful. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Go see it in theaters. You'll thank me later. Bit of warning, if you offend easily, don't see it. NSFW. Anyway, Rebecca?
That was only 1 and not 5.
So it would take us a certainly long amount of time to get through all 5. Plus, my favorite movies get rather esoteric. I don't want to tell you because it'll make you think, well, maybe I'm not going to follow his recommendation for Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I have a passion for 80s movies. One of my favorites of all time is Johnny Dangerously, which I was disappointed to find out is not available on streaming in any format whatsoever. I like Kevin Smith's Dogma, which is not available for streaming whatsoever. So I actually have a DVD player in my house. I'll explain what that is later, Rebecca, that I use to watch those old 80s films.
What's a DVD,
I can't watch any other way.
Edward? That'll be our next podcast.
It's like a coaster, that you can actually put in, and it's like streaming that you can watch when the Wi-Fi is down. Oh, you've never experienced that? We'll talk about it later.
Once or twice.
Yes. Edward, tell me your tales of yore.
What is rewind?
I want to be kind. Explain this to me.
Are you into podcasts or are you more into music?
I'm a podcast person. When I get in the car, I don't want to. This is really weird. I always think like I'm losing time. If I may quote Hamilton. Also, I'm a big fan of musical theater. So again, basically a 14-year-old girl trapped in the body of a 47-year-old man. But because I always like write like I'm running out of time. I always like listen like I'm running out of time. So if I'm in the car, I want to be educating myself. So I tend to go podcast. I'm currently listening to, well, pretty much anything on Freakonomics. And then my wife and I actually do a podcast trivia that comes out once a week called Pod Quiz. So PODQUIZ, and it's narrated by a British person, so you know he's smart because he has a cool accent.
Obviously, that's how it works. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Hi, does that count? Am I allowed to list like a entire country as food? Yeah, if I could eat one cuisine, it would be Thai food. I love my food spicy. So I'm a vegan, but I'm not what I call a bland vegan. I like my food as spicy as possible. So give me, Tex-Mex, Indian, Thai food. But if there was just one food, I was like, no, you got to narrow it down, Edward. It actually wouldn't be Thai. It would be Italian, and it would specifically be chocolate gelato, because chocolate has proved God loves us and wants us to be happy.
I feel like that might not be the most nutritious choice, but I do get it.
I wouldn't live long, but I would live happy.
In the summer, assuming that the weather is nice enough, would you rather go to the beach or go camping? So I'm assuming you're not doing this in Texas.
Okay, so going camping, that's like where you pretend to be homeless for a couple of days. Yeah, not my thing.
Beach guy?
Yes, I'm more like an anything but camping guy. I want to try. So I love hiking. It's really bizarre, but like, so I will do a 14-mile day hike. I'm not against, work. So I've before gone to like Colorado, Wyoming, and done like a start before dawn, get back after dark, and head to the Continental Divide and back. That's cool. I have nothing against nature. I just don't want to sleep on it and have it all around me and things crawling like from every direction. So yeah, long-winded way of saying I'm gonna go beach.
I feel that. How do you take your coffee?
Non-existent. I have never had a cup of coffee in my entire life. I will do tea. So to clarify, my wife says I have an unrefined palate. And what she means by that is I don't like anything with the slightest hint of bitter in it. So I have never had a beer. I've had a sip of one and went, why would someone drink something that tastes like it's gone bad? Coffee is like, coffee is sucking on a caffeine pill. It's like, wine I don't get, olives I don't get either. So basically the way I take coffee is I throw it away and then order something else, I think is the honest way to put it. But I can taste like the hint of it. Like I've never had tiramisu because it tastes like coffee. And everyone's like, oh, it's got a vague hint of it. I'm like, no, it tastes like you're drinking a cup of coffee. And you've ruined chocolate, and that's hard to do.
It is difficult. So what alcoholic beverages do you like, since you mentioned beer and wine?
Yeah, so my wife, this is relevant. My wife will go to a bar and she will order like a whiskey or an old fashioned or like a whiskey sour or like a craft beer. I will order anything that has an umbrella in it. Because I don't like the taste of alcohol, but I do like the taste of like coconut and pineapple. So pina colada or something like that. But the funny part is the bartender will come back and bring us the two drinks and inevitably hand me the whiskey and her the thing with the umbrella in it. And then we smile and wait for them to leave, and then we rotate.
Yeah, I'm in a similar relationship. It's happened to my husband and I several times.
I'm going to start a support group for guys who drink pina coladas as their primary drink.
You should.
Yeah.
And then like a sister support group for women who drink
the stiff stuff.
Touch.
Yeah.
So moving on to more Kscope related things.
Everyone's like, ooh, content. Yes. Thank you everyone for being part of the get to know portion. We will continue on for some slightly more get to know portion. Go ahead, Rebecca. This is amusing me greatly. I don't care if everyone else is bored to tears. We'll let you all know when we're showing content slides. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Well, also the content slides will be on the screen. So
that will also be a clue. Yeah.
Yes.
So when they see their screen suddenly stop showing this massive Edward head. Yeah, go for it.
So how many Kscope conferences have you attended? And actually, I'm going to guess, is it 25?
No, although I have been to the Kscope or its predecessors 27 years in a row. Glenn Schwarzberg can keep me honest on this one. It was the Arbor Dimensions conference. I always confused that one with the ComShare conference back in like 95. But because before, Oracle, there was Hyperion. Before Hyperion, there was Arbor. And I've been doing S-Base since 95. And I went to a conference that year. It was Dimensions and Solutions. Thank you, Glenn, for backing me up on that. So I actually went and spoke at that very first Dimensions conference. That was 27 years ago. So I'll give you credit for this one. My presentation was S-Base allocation calc scripts for mere mortals. Truly one of the worst presentations I've ever delivered. That was before I actually got comfortable in front of an audience. And I apologize to anyone who went to that presentation back in 95. So I went to every Dimensions, I went to every Solutions, and when they turned off Solutions, and Mike Riley, who was president of ODTUG, and I at the time, got in a bit of a Twitter blog war, if you will. And I said, hey, if you can put on a good conference that delivers the quality of content of Hyperion, I will shout it from the rooftops. And he invited me to put a track together back in 2008. So they had their first ever S-Base track in 2008, and we all sat together in one room for 4 days, and it was a blast. And we had amazing speakers and amazing attendance. And I, to this day, shouting it from the rooftops, Mike was right. Kscope is an amazing conference. You all should go, which means this will be my 15th year, because I think 22 minus 8. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We've the last 2 years of COVID-ness, so don't count those. So 13 Kscopes. I could have just said 13 and saved like 5 minutes of everyone's life.
Hey, we're here to get to know you, so it works.
Glenn's counting virtual Kscope, so he's giving me 15. So thanks.
Glenn's the only one who matters.
Yeah.
As far as what counts and does not. So I have not
arbiter of truth. Yeah.
It's terrifying. I'm not going to go that far. I have not been to an in-person Kscope yet, but I have heard rumors that you play something called Werewolf there.
Oh, yes. For anybody that, sorry, all Schwarzbergs matter. I wasn't trying to imply only Glenn mattered. There was a Tammy Schwarzberg who says, why is it just Glenn? So yes, at Kscope, sometimes we share the moderating love this year. I think I'm the only one doing it, but on Sunday night at 10:30 and Monday night at 10:30, I'll be sharing a party game called Werewolf. And it's a social game where you're trying to figure out who are the good villagers and who are the dirty, stinking, evil werewolves, and then you're trying to get the werewolves killed. It's a great opportunity to get to meet everybody at Kscope. If you're not going to Kscope, I recommend you go to Target and buy a copy of Ultimate Werewolf. It's a ton of fun.
Or both.
Good point. Yeah, I should resell games of that. Like, that's how I'm going to earn my living. I'm going to resell Werewolf at Kscope. It's like afterwards, like, want to take it home? Yeah. Yes, if you go to Target.
At the very least, they should really give you like a discount code.
Yeah. I know the creator of the game, Ted Alspach, and I've asked him a few times, can I get a discount code? And at one point he said, back my next Kickstarter and I'll put you in the game. So
you're already in the game.
Yeah, well, no, so that's why there's an InterRel card with me in a hat, and I'm half werewolf, half villager. It's because I backed Ted Alspach's Kickstarter, and he did not give me a discount. So
don't buy the game, actually.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, you teach that Alspach guy a lesson.
So do you prefer being a villager, special character, or a werewolf?
I prefer moderating because, of course, I do. But when I'm playing, being a werewolf is more interesting. You can being a villager is about spotting people. Being a werewolf is about pretending to spot people while actually killing people. And it's more complicated because some people, like when they're a werewolf, they're like, oh, I don't need to pay attention during the day. I know who the good and the bad people are. you can't act like that or you will get killed. The village will notice you're not paying attention. So as a werewolf, I'm scary good. I know who all the werewolves in the village are, and I can pick them out based on all their tells. But yeah, werewolf. Maybe I'll play a game this year. I'll have Glenn Schwartzberg come like moderate like one of the games, or Joe Altman moderate one of the games, or Wayne. I'll play one. My problem is because people know I know the game really well. The werewolves will eat me the first night if I'm a villager, and if I'm alive the second day, the villager go, Edward must be a werewolf because he's alive. So I usually could play one night, like that's it. That was relevant to the 36 of you who understand werewolf, and the rest of you are like, I have no idea what he's talking about. But come to Kscope, play it. It's fun.
Always play werewolf.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what we've learned about Edward so far is that he likes being in charge, being the forever DM and the CEO and the moderator, and he likes to lie. Likes to play poker.
Wait, I feel like that's not directly what I said, but I did start off with bluffing and end with saying I want to be a werewolf and disguising that I'm a werewolf. So yeah, you fill in the blanks. Although every single thing I said was, to the best of my knowledge, completely true. So,
but you never lie about EPM.
That's a good point. Yeah, this is just the facts as best as I know them. And if I sometimes accidentally, like Glenn Schwartzberg waits 2 to 3 seconds for correcting me and saying, no, Edward is telling you old information. Allow me to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's literally just the time it takes for him to type it. And
yeah, for anybody that, oh, sorry, are you done asking questions? Should I talk through this part now?
No, I'm not done asking questions. I have 8 more minutes of questions, Edward.
Oh, do you really? Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Go for it. I will stop. I will stop sharing.
Unless if you guys want to stop learning about Edward and get on to the preview, you're welcome to send that in chat and we will.
Yeah, and if you do have any questions, either personal questions or EPM questions or Kscope questions, please use the Q&A. It's right down there at the bottom of your screen, and ask me anything. So Rebecca, keep going.
Yeah, that's so weird. Someone's asking for your credit card number.
Yeah, well, everybody seems to have the last 4 digits at this point.
So what's your most memorable Kscope moment outside of werewolves?
So I was conference chair back in 2011, 2012, and I agreed to be conference chair the first year on 3 conditions, and it all had to do with the party at the end. I said, if I get above a certain level of attendance, if we get more than 1,000 people at the conference, there are 3 things that I absolutely want. I want to hold the party on a boat. I want to have young MC come play a set at the party, and I want to blow stuff up, is essentially what I said. And we did it. We beat 1,000 people for that year, which they at least hadn't seen it in recent times. They might have done it back in the late 90s, because Kscope ODTUG actually dates back to 97, the same year that we were founded. So we were in Long Beach that year. So we rented out the Queen Mary and held our closing event on the Queen Mary in Long Beach Harbor. We did get young MC to come perform. And one of my highlights was that he was used to getting stiffed at gigs like that he would do. So you had to pay him in advance and you had to pay him in cash. There was this moment where Kathleen McCaslin had to like hand him an envelope, like a plain envelope with $100 bills in it. And she was so awkward. I was like, this is awesome. Like, can I video you doing this activity? But anyway, we got young MC, and at the end of the night, we actually got to shoot fireworks off over Long Beach Harbor. So it was pretty amazing. And just watching the growth of it over the last few years and everybody embracing it. I'm happy to be back in person again this year. It'll be nice seeing a lot of old friends again.
For sure. So you're presenting on revolutionizing budgeting and planning, and also the state of financial solutions transformation. What got you interested in those topics from the beginning?
So budgeting and planning, my first finance role, my background's not in finance, although I do have a degree in data science. It's not in finance. I picked up finance very early on, back in '92, and I liked budgeting and planning because it was forward looking. No offense to actuals. I apologize if anyone here is the general ledger, but it's really about what already happened. And it's much more interesting to me to think of like what's going to happen. As you can tell, I'm very much a, are you headed in the right direction? Not were you headed in the right direction type person. So I love budgeting and planning. I love how much it's changed since the days back when I was 20 and started doing this whole thing. It's been a great journey. Financial transformation, I like what's kind of in the air right now, that people are not just sitting on what they've been doing and going, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The companies that were still in that mode got out of it in about a 1 week period in March of 2020. Where they were like, oh, it's fine. Let's just budget once a year and spend 6 months on it and come up with one set of numbers, because by the start of March 2020, we're like, oh, it's all going to be fine. By the end of March 2020, they were like, yeah, all we know is our numbers are going to be wrong. We just don't know how wrong. So watching finance change slowly until it changed very quickly has been really an interesting journey over the last 5 or 6 years. So I'll show you a little bit of each of those presentations in a bit, just to tease you of the 2 of the 3 sessions I'll be doing at Kscope.
So go ahead and get those queued up while you're telling us about what you're hoping people really take from the presentations.
Sure. So the revolutionizing budgeting and planning, it's kind of a walk through the history to the present to the future of budgeting. And there are a lot of really interesting things that are happening that are cutting edge, not technologically, but they're cutting edge process wise, that I really want people to understand. And the finance transformation one, I really want us I want people to walk away, understand what the outside world is doing and see the data and see, oh, wow, we're lagging in this area, but we're leading in this area, or this is how long it takes to close a book. So this is how long it takes to do a plan, and just give people those comparative data points. And then my EPM is your, by the way, I love the vendor session because I get to do whatever I want for the vendor session. So I've in prior years like, oh, this is what all the cloud products do, independent of Oracle. This is what they actually do, and this is kind of how they fit. And one year, I guess I was in kind of a what I want to say, a testy mood. So I did a session titled 10 Ways Your Consulting Company is Charging You Too Much. It's like, that one got maybe so many friends across the partner community. Yeah. But this year I'm doing EPM as your love language, why having EPM on your resume is the ticket to success. And it's about why EPM is in demand right now and how all of the attendees can keep being in demand. The good news, it's on the forefront of what people are looking for, particularly at the CFO level, in the office of the CFO. So it's one of those things like where you just assume every finance person knows planning and knows reporting and knows cubes and dimensions and all that, to now they're specifically looking for it. And I want to explain to everybody why. And I want to give them all a t-shirt, so.
That sounds exciting. And as a reminder, we just put into the chat the link to register for that last session. He talked about the vendor session. And if you sign up there, we will have a t-shirt ready for you on the day of. It's a very special t-shirt.
I'll show it off in like a little bit. So slides now?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca, for doing like amazing hosting and asking questions. So what I'm going to do right now is just give everybody a bit of a sampling for each one of those. I didn't bother explaining to anyone actually who I am. So I'm actually CEO of ArganoInterRel, and I'm EVP of Performance Management for the entirety of Argano. So we've been around for 25 years, just trying to leave that world a smarter place than they found it, which is why I'm doing 3 sessions at Kscope, and I think across all of Interrel, we're doing 13. So at a high level, what I want people to understand is that the world is changing. That historical view of if it ain't broke, don't fix it has been replaced with just because it ain't broke doesn't mean it can't be better. And people always think that their industry is pretty stable until it turns out they were really wrong. the taxi drivers thought, well, there's no way, and we have governmental lock-in in most areas. There's like way anybody can expand into this area. And then next thing you know, they're all upended by a company that doesn't own a single cap. The hotel industry says, look at the capital it takes to do this. We have a massive barrier to entry. And then overnight they're overthrown by Airbnb that doesn't own a single hotel room. And in every one of those cases, all those people thought they were in extremely stable industries. The automotive industry said, we have a massive advantage because the capital is required to go out and build a car. And we have these factories and we are going to be so much better electric because all we have to do is take the engine out and put a battery in where the engine is, and we can get running faster. And then Elon comes along and says, we're good friends. I call him Elon. Elon Musk comes along and says, yeah, but you're trying to take an old thing that was designed for gears. Why do you have to put the battery in the front? Why don't you make the battery the frame of the car or the foundation of the car and take the gears out of the way? We are actually better off because we are starting over at designing something. So one of the things that I encourage everybody to do, so imagine on your screen, if you will, feel free to touch it unless it's a touch screen. The axis along the bottom is how fast you feel your company changes. Are you pretty much the middle of the road, or you're like, yeah, we're actually really slow to change, and then, or are we really fast? We never made a change we didn't like. Oh, it's Wednesday, it must be reorganization day. The axis up the side is your industry as a whole. So whatever company you're in, imagine the industry. So if you're sticking with my taxi cab example, that's Edward's taxi cab company, slow to change, industry, all of a sudden going through a massive lot of rapid change right now. That's not necessarily a good space to be, but go ahead and hold your finger on where you think you are kind of company wise versus industry wise. Now, what you have to realize is if you're in the bottom left, you're in a static industry until you are disrupted. Something will come along. It'll be the app that destroys blank, and we don't know what it's going to be. You'll be destroyed by the companies that are in the bottom right, because you are static until a disruptor comes along, where they are going to come in and be faster at changing than you actually are. If you're in the top left, that means you're on a path towards insolvency. If you don't figure out how to do those rapid changes, your industry will change faster than you are. For instance, banking right now is going through a massive financial technology, fintech revolution.
Yes.
The banks that are doing well, things like JPMC. JP Morgan Chase is really more of a tech company that happens to do banking. Well, there are a lot of more static banks that think of banking as somebody walking into a branch or going up to an ATM, giving money, putting money in or taking money back out again, and they're being widely disrupted. Even things that, sticking on a bank example, I walked into a Capital One cafe when I was in South Beach like a week and a half ago. It doesn't look like a bank. It looks like a coffee shop. But why does a bank have to look like a bank? Wouldn't it be more comfortable if you went up to the barista and they gave you a nice coffee and then you sat down at a table and then somebody came by and asked you about your loan? So what we want to do is figure out, we want to be as far right on this grid as possible. It's better to be a disruptor, an evolver, or a thought leader than it is to be a follower or to be in an at-risk area. Strategically, any system being built nowadays focuses on 4 critical things. Number one, we are done with the days of building silos. If we find ourselves, we should be off implementing a planning system, and then we're going to think about doing a consolidation system, and then maybe we're going to talk about our ERP, and then we're going to do something with human capital. Maybe then we'll handle our CRM upgrade. You're building systems designed not to talk to each other. So strategically, we have to not only connect those silos we've already built, we have to stop building what those silos are. From an automated standpoint, it's amazing how often I'll go into a company and they'll say, what is your solution? And they'll start by answering something really techy, like, oh, we're an Oracle shop top to bottom, or we do all this in SAP. And then you ask, well, what about this? What about this? What about this questions? And they will get to a point where eventually they start answering with Excel or text exports. And it's because it's being done, but it's getting done through human power. essentially, which is not what we want to be doing in 2022. So we need to free up humans to use their experience and free the computers up to do all the things that can be automated. Turn over to the robots what the robots are good at, leaving only what you specifically can do up to you. Another big change that's happening lately, strategically in EPM, we used to, and this was, some companies are actually still in this even post-COVID, they put processes in place, assuming those processes will never change. And just because something was right for your company 10 years ago doesn't mean it's still right. We have to change our processes as the outside world changes. So my advice, don't take a process that is so rigid that's the only thing the solution will support, because otherwise your digital foundations become a governor of your ability to innovate instead of an enabler of your ability to innovate. And then finally, in case anyone is still in an on-prem world, don't spend any more money buying on-prem servers. Don't go with a hosted on-prem solution. Make your entire software stack someone else's problem. Just use modern cloud technology, because once you do, it's going to upgrade for you. And I've been telling people to go to the cloud since 2016, and they were like, why, Edward? This is a fad like grid computing. I never pushed grid computing. I want to point that out. Some companies were early adopters, some companies are late adopters, but everybody who's over there has essentially done their final upgrade. The only time you're ever going to have to do another upgrade is if your vendor isn't innovating fast enough. So go with a really innovative cloud provider that keeps adding cool new stuff, and then you don't have to worry. Just once a month, new things show up versus having to constantly do an upgrade, or God's forbid, only do an upgrade every 3 to 5 years. So which leads me to one of the 3 sessions. So as many of you know, once a year I do a survey on the state of finance transformation. And state of finance transformation, I used to call it the state of business analytics, but I wanted it to be broader. What is happening in the world of finance? And we ask generally around 300 companies, all 100 million USD or larger, about half of them $1 billion or larger. And we ask them what's going on with planning, what's going on with consolidation, what's going on with reporting. So there might be a poll on the screen like while I'm talking about this, but answer really quickly, then I can stop the poll. So in terms of the data that we're looking at, we also look at a lot of market share information. So I'll be sharing that with everybody at Kscope. So I'll be able to tell you, what percentage of people use this budget product, or what percentage use this consolidation product, what percentage of people use this ERP that are out there. But some of the, we have so much data. This year we ended up with, I feel like it was 296 companies, unique companies. We had over actually, I think it was over 400 if you include multiple people from a company. But in a specific company, I think it was 296. Okay, I'll have 5 more seconds to answer the poll on your screen. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cool. Hey, if you're curious, this makes a total lot of sense. 80% of you are going to Kscope. So good job. So from an industry standpoint, this changes from year to year as kind of sampling percentage. But if you'll notice, if you have 300 responses and roughly, even if you get down to like the 4 or 5%, we still have 20 plus companies that are answering for those individual industries. As I said before, from a kind of revenue standpoint, it's only 17% of it is what we would consider to be the small to mid-sized space, 25% in kind of the emerging space, and fully the rest of it is $1 billion and up, including 30 companies that are actually in the global $100 billion plus per year size. So we're going to deep dive into all this information. We are going to talk about some market share. People have been talking like, well, what's the growth in cloud products? Well, for, I believe, the first year ever in our survey, you notice that Oracle Cloud ERP is bigger than any individual on-prem product. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't just go out to Oracle customers, it goes out to anybody. So that's why you see Dynamics coming in at number 3, you see SAP coming in at number 5. That's a little misleading that Oracle Cloud ERP is the longest bar, because think about how many on-prem ERPs Oracle owns, right? They own JD Edwards, they own PeopleSoft, they own Oracle E-Business Suite. If you add those up, you actually get a bigger bar than Oracle Cloud ERP. Interesting statistic, if you actually add up all these, you get something ridiculous like 172%. In case you think Edward doesn't know how to do math, that's irrelevant on if I know how to do math. It's because of how many companies nowadays do not have a single ERP. So just like that poll question you just saw, this is a multi-select asking people, what are all of the ERP softwares your company uses? And around a third to a half actually have more than one major ERP. And a lot of this has to do with growth through mergers, growth through acquisitions. We also asked some transformative questions about the last couple of years, and we talked about those results at Kscope. One of the really interesting ones, when I was looking through it, did the global pandemic expose deficiencies in your ability to make agile adjustments? And I thought that probably number one would be, oh, we're working remotely or something like that. The number one thing it exposed was, do we have the right people to do the job? Can we get them in fast enough? How can we staff all those projects? Once in a while, something comes out that kind of surprises me. And this one and the next one are one of them. So we asked this question, we asked two different related questions. So to explain what's on your screen, the first question was, how likely are you to recommend this financial consolidation system? And it's on a standard scale of 1 to 7. So you can say very likely all the way down to very unlikely. And thankfully, on the consolidation side, very few people are on the fence. It's like, whatever. It usually goes to like one extreme or another. Sometimes you come up with interesting things. There are no really passionate people that like SAP, but 41% of the people that use it, like, yeah, I guess I'd recommend it. You get areas where people are really passionate. Oracle EPM on the consolidation side, 27% are very likely to recommend it, and 36% are likely, which gives it a 53%. Well, heck, if you actually add it to somewhat likely, it's 73% to recommend. So it's interesting. So it's interesting on the left side, what products people would recommend. It's also interesting on the right side, how many people wouldn't recommend them. I'm not sure what was going on with the Anaplan respondents, but they also were in a testy mood that day. But they clearly, the biggest bucket, Anaplan's not really consolidation tools. That one doesn't really surprise me that they came at 29% unlikely. What surprises me is that one, 60% of the respondents that have Anaplan were somewhat unlikely to recommend them as a planning solution. And it's like, okay, now I'm thrown. But we went and looked at the data, and that is indeed what the respondents say. So it's interesting information. I present it, I give you my analysis of the commentary, but I'll give you all the data, I'll give you the slides. You can go make your own determinations and draw your own conclusions. Have fun with it. So speaking of planning, one of the things that I've noticed is when planning systems get updated regularly, people are happier with them. When they get stagnant, like when we're all still doing bottoms up planning, people tend to be pretty unhappy with it as a solution. So one of the sessions that I'm doing at Kscope is all about how to get that more modern planning system, how to get something that people are really excited about and really going to enjoy actually using. So I'm going to not give you the whole presentation, otherwise then why would you have to go? So I started, when I was putting it together, I used to call these sessions best practices in budgeting and planning. And then I realized you can't have 18 things tied for best practices. That's kind of like saying everything is a top priority. So I have ditched my best practices. I'm not even going to say these are leading practices. These are more like practices in planning. So some of these actually, believe it or not, make sense. Doing by the way, I'm going to show you 18. I'm not going to go through these in detail. We'll cover that actually at the conference, but sometimes historical basis actually makes a good sense, a good guess for your next year budget. If you're in a slow changing industry that really hasn't evolved since the 50s, sometimes you can just copy it over, move it across, and add a little inflation, or nowadays a big inflation increase, and call it a day. Integrated business planning is something that has been around for a while, but it's having a resurgence actually. Integrated business planning basically says each step of the process, feed it to the next thing. So if you have a strat plan number, feed it to your financial budget, feed that to your forecast, feed that to your rolling forecast, feed that to your sales and operational plan. It's having a pleasant resurgence, and at the conference, I'll explain why. Still tried and true, and you'll see some of this data in the survey. Bottoms up is still the #1 way people budget, but it's been going down for 6 straight years in terms of market share. So, or in terms of practice that people are using. It's kind of the holdover, and people have had a hard time getting away from it. But let's go do a great big annual budget and talk to 1,000 people about what they think their numbers are. Let's add it up, and then let's have the CFO change it at the top level. Forecasting is a way of getting out of that budget and getting into a habit of redoing it more often. Some companies are doing a top-down strategic plan that becomes the bottoms-up budget. Some companies are doing a top-down strategic plan that in no way aligns with the bottoms-up budget. And we'll talk about how to bring those together. We'll talk about rolling forecasts and how far out they should go. I'll give you a hint, it is not 18 months. I don't know where that came from. I watched it happen over the last 27 years, and I was like, wow, that's fascinating that that actually got rolled out that way. It's kind of like, when did meetings all become exactly 30 minutes or an hour? Like, how is all content, exactly that long? Oh, that's because Outlook schedules everything in 30 to an hour long increments. But anyway, tangent for another day. Driver-based, getting away from those dollars, getting more to units and rates. What if modeling falling a little bit out of favor, really being replaced by scenario planning. So if what if modeling is changing your numbers and seeing the impact, scenario planning is more about, let's come up with the possible scenarios that could occur in the next year, and then let's have a set of numbers ready at hand in case that actually does happen. Scenario planning is probably, of all these 18, the one that's gone through the most adoption as well as the most changing over the last 2 years. It started out as scenario planning, then it became scenario modeling, then it became scenario management, where people are saying, well, which ones do I actually want to happen? But wherever you are in the scenario planning journey, we'll talk through kind of where the next step is. And then we'll start talking about some of the more, I won't say cutting edge, I'll say things that are being adopted as the cool new thing at whatever random company it happens to be. But I'll explain to you why each one of these is actually good and why each one is helpful. So we'll talk through why graphical planning is helpful. We'll talk through when you would want to adopt zero-based budgeting and when you will not. Thanks, Kraft Heinz, for teaching us when you should not adopt zero-based budgeting. We'll talk through predictive planning when it makes sense, which is every month of the last 2 years, and when it doesn't make sense, March of 2020. Aside from that blip, predictive planning was on a hot streak. It was like that roulette wheel that only does red. And then all of a sudden, it was like when people started betting on it, all of a sudden like black in March of 2020. But predictive planning is back because it's factored in the fact that pandemics now happen. We'll talk about agile planning and what that means. We'll talk about beyond budgeting, when you want to get away from a budget, more adopt a forecast. We'll get into some kind of really interesting things that if you could hit reset, you might very well do. Reference planning, go find the last time something like that occurred and use that as your starting budget or your starting forecast going forward. We'll talk about continuous planning, always be planning, ABP, always be planning. We'll talk about success factor planning, which is really getting into KPIs and getting away from dollars at all, not even really converting those KPIs to dollars. And just like I was really advocating for scenario planning over the last 5 years, I'm still advocating for scenario planning, but people are starting to do it. I'm now advocating for range-based forecasting, which is don't plan for one number, plan for a range, because one number loses information when you force down to one. We'll talk through, I will probably spend about 15 minutes on just scenario planning at Kscope, because how we scenario plan is different. Where we used to go, if this happens to us, this is how we will respond. And there's really been a change lately towards these situations could occur. How do I make sure those situations occur and that we're driving towards those numbers? And then the session that I get to do, just because I get to pick it up and make a session. I'm doing EPM as my love language. By having EPM on your resume is the ticket to success. So we're going to talk about the value that EPM provides. I will tell you, EPM and analytics, it's the place to be right now. It doesn't matter if you're in the financial world, it doesn't matter if you're the IT world. If you're the blending of both, you are what CFOs are looking for these days. It's because companies have been collecting scads of data for decades, and they're finally wanting to actually do something with it. So right now, the world of enterprise performance management is extremely high demand and extremely low supply. Why does this matter to all of you? If you become an EPM expert, you're going to not only command higher salaries, you're going to have amazing job security. There is great demand right now for top EPM talent. So if you want to break, maybe some of you are like, well, I'd like to understand more about that. Right now I'm kind of more assigned EPM things. I don't really get to drive it. I don't understand the breadth of the world. If you want to break into that world of EPM or analytics, BI, business analytics, I'm going to talk about the basics of how those areas are expanding. I'm going to talk about your path to becoming an expert. I'm going to talk about resources to go to for more information. I'll leave it at this. College is important for getting your first job, but now what's critical is business expertise. There are a lot of things that are driving this right now. I wish I had time right now to explain to you Industry 4.0, but we're going to leave that as a teaser for Kscope. Go Google it. It's fascinating. But Industry 4.0, sometimes called the digital renaissance, it's making the role of FP&A more strategic. It's trying to use more tools like robotic process automation, data and advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, blockchain to really figure out what that future is going to look for. And there is a war for talent, and that's really good if you are the talent, or if you want to go find the talent. I'll help you answer that one as well, so that you are on the receiving side of the Great Resignation. You are not on the giving up side of the Great Resignation. I have a lot of data to support this, but finance's role has changed from being one that is backward looking, basically what already happened, to being much more, not just forward looking, but that bridge to strategy. Forbes did a survey of Fortune 500 CFOs, and they said the number one quality of a good CFO in the office of a CFO is that they can bridge the gap between strategy and finance whenever possible. That their job doesn't stop when they present an income statement, that it starts when they present an income statement. So if you can have this unique perspective where you have financial information and know how to slice and dice it, know how to analyze it, you will go to being that forward-looking person at a forward-looking company. Companies that treat finance as a strategic driver, they're thriving. Companies where finance is an afterthought, companies that think finance is useless overhead waiting to be minimized, those companies are going to be irrelevant by the time this decade is over, if not even faster. Not only because they're going to be bankrupt, people don't want to work for those companies. They want to go over to organizations where they're treated more strategically. This is a callback to my State of Finance Transformation presentations. This is actually a slide from that session we asked a question. It's really simple, binary. It's always easy when the question is yes or no, because the percentage adds up to 100. We asked if your FP&A department in COVID times is serving in a more strategic role, basically whether they're being brought into the room more when it's time to talk about strategy. And so your possible answers to this question are yes or no. And our time frame is really simple. Start of the pandemic, March 2020, or you can argue it's been around for years, whatever. March 2020 till when we did this survey in December and January of this December last year, January this year, what was the percentage breakout? Ready? Got your idea in your head of what it's going to be. Only 10.5% of companies said FP&A did not become more strategic during the pandemic. I thought it was going to be high. I had no idea it was going to be that high, which is why data is good. We can ask these questions, get our answers back. So if you are part of FP&A, you should feel very appreciated because over the last 2 years, you have a more strategic role. what you're doing is a whole lot more valued than it was historically. So I hope that you've learned something and will continue, because
as your body grows bigger, your mind must flower. It's great to learn, because knowledge is power. It's Schoolhouse Rocking, the chip off the block of your favorite schoolhouse, schoolhouse rock.
I kind of want to pay someone to make that say Schoolhouse Roske, but I could do it under the parody exemption, and I think I'm okay. So I hope to see many of you at Kscope. If you do, these are the 3 sessions I'll be hosting. We dropped the link in the chat box before, and we can drop it in there again just to make sure everybody got it. Glenn Swartzberg says that 10.5% was where FP&A was already strategic. Yes, that's correct. It is now strategic at 100% of companies. Excellent clarification. So if you got to that link in the chat box and sign up for the vendor session, tell us your t-shirt size. Why is he asking me for a t-shirt size? Because I'm going to give you a t-shirt. It says EPM is my love language. It's just kind of fun. And if you're wondering if like this is a big promo thing, I made the company logo as small as is humanly possible, yet still making it a company expense. And it's like on the back at the bottom, like this big. So you can proudly walk around saying EPM is my love language, even if you're one of my competitors or anything else. We have a total of 13 sessions at Kscope, and feel free to screenshot this one if you want. We'll also send it out in an email, but we hope you can join me plus the even better speakers that are coming from InterRel and for the rest of the conference. As Rebecca was talking about at the beginning, this is the first of 6 weeks. So I encourage you to come next week, get to know Glenn Swartzberg. I don't care what his family says. He's actually a really good guy. You should get to know him, and you can ask him things about S-Base. You can get a teaser of some of his presentations as well. We're talking strategic modeling the week after that, financial close the week after that, enterprise planning the week after that, finally analytics, and then we will be at the amazing Kscope22 conference. So, and again, when you do go out there to register, use code ArganoInterRel. It takes $100 off of every person. If you want to register for next week's session or any of the other ones, go to interrel.com/EPMlove. And I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you've learned some stuff. Rebecca, any sign-off words?
Just that if you haven't signed up for Kscope yet, make sure to do so using our code, ArganoInterRel. We would hate for you to pay $100 more than you needed. And I'm excited to see everyone next week as we get to know Glenn Swartzberg a little bit better. Do you have any advice for me interviewing him, Edward?
I think it'd be really helpful if he wore a name tag to his presentation, in case you forget what his name is. Glenn loves wearing name tags. You'll find that out about him. No, I will feed you all kinds of embarrassing insightful Glenn Swartzberg questions to ask him next week. Also talk to Tammy. She will have a bunch as well. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have an awesome week.
Bye.